So thank you everyone for tuning in. This is really exciting for me. Very exciting for Utkarsh as well. I'm honestly honored that he's chosen me to kick off this entire book launch. Um, and I got the book, of course, when as soon as it came out, and I have it here on my Kindle. Definitely check it out if you haven't already. It's available on Kindle. It's going to be available on paperback. I think shipping starts tomorrow. And it's definitely a book to have. I think the day I bought it, I just couldn't put it down. It took me a couple of days to finish. But more what's been interesting to me is, and this is just the type of book it is, but since I finished reading it, I find myself going back multiple times to certain chapters, to certain parts. And honestly, it's just that sort of book where it has so much value and so much wisdom, that it's not something that you can get through in a day or two or even three. And it's not even meant to be, at least the way I interpret it, it's not meant to be a book that you sort of finish and you sort of put down and never really go back to. It's something that I've kept. I have it, on my iPad, on my Kindle all the time. I'm really excited to get it in hard copy as well, because there's just so many things that I'm able to apply on a day-to-day basis that I just find myself going back over and over again. One thing I want to say about the book before I get started is that it's something that's helped me contextualize and organize many parts of my life. And I'm sure, as you guys read it as well, y'all will feel that, okay, I have heard about this before. This is something I've seen. This is something I've heard. And more importantly, and this is something, I think Utkarsh wants everyone to realize as well as they read it, is that a lot of the concepts he's sort of speaking about, a lot of the mental models, a lot of the other chapters will seem new when you go through the index or when you go through the contents page. But actually, when you actually read it, understand what it's trying to say, you'll realize that, oh, this is something that, I have been doing in my life. I just didn't know it was called this. I just didn't realize it was this. And what it's helped me do is that, okay, these were things that I might have been touching upon, a little shallow understanding, but this has helped me contextualize and organize all of these thoughts, these mental models, and really put in, I think on a daily basis. It's only been a few days since I finished the book, of course, but on a daily basis, I'm able to then think about, okay, or when I'm seeing these things in action, I'm like, oh, now I have a way to contextualize this or a way to sort of organize this. So I'm really excited for everyone to read the book, and thank you so much, Utkarsh, Network Capital. It's sort of great to be able to kick off, unfortunately virtual, but the book tour, and I'm sure we'll definitely do something in person once we launch, once hopefully things begin to get better. Just a quick word of introduction on myself before we go started, just because that's going to help contextualize a lot of what I speak about. But so my name is Mishaal. I work in the CEO's office at Dr. Vaidya's, but I'm also the co-founder of a creative agency called Plain Crazy. And I graduated from law school 2.5 years ago now, back in 2018. And I've been admitted to Harvard Business School for my MBA as part of their 2+2 program. And I also do advise and consult with a couple of other startups. And of course, this sounds like a very unconventional sort of career. A lot of people ask me, oh, law school to MBA to creative agency, to again, start up in the Ayurveda healthcare space. How did this happen? And I hope to talk a bit more about that through, examples and chapters in the book, and of course, some of the mental models as well. The way I'm going to structure this, there are 3 chapters really that the moment I read them, I was like, okay, this has had a huge impact. This has helped me contextualize things. And I think this is something that will help me moving forward. So I thought it'd be interesting for me to just pick up certain parts of these 3 chapters, certain quotes, certain mental models that apply to these. And accordingly, just talk about it, and hopefully it resonates with you as well. I'm unsure if you guys can ask me questions directly because I'm on AirMeet, but do put your questions on Facebook. I think there is someone monitoring that. Whatever questions you have, feel free to put them in the comments, and I'd be happy to sort of answer them as well about the book and about the chapters. So, like I said, there are 3 chapters that I want to talk about, and I'm going to sort of hopefully contextualize them in the context of my career and my career choices as well. So, starting, and I just spoke about, okay, lawyer, creative agency, MBA, Ayurveda startups, very unconventional. And this, so when I was in the eighth grade, I remember going for a video game. So I went for the summer camp where I learned how to code, and I made a couple of video games, and I was like, okay, I know what I'm doing. This is the rest of my life. And that was me from ninth grade, 10th grade. I used to spend a lot of my time coding. I was building, I built the voting system for my school elections with a friend. We used to stay up all night. I did the Linux from scratch, all of that. And I thought I'd found my passion. And then I just realized, I think, getting into C, C++, some of those programming languages, I was like, okay, not a big fan of the physics and maths here. And I loved English, history. And I did my IB where I took English, history, and economics as my high level. And the summer before I started 11th grade, I did a pre-law summer camp. And I was like, oh, I love this and I want to be a lawyer. And I actually come from a family of lawyers. I'm a fourth generation lawyer. And I was like, okay, this makes complete sense. This is what I want to do. And I got into law school. And when I got into law school, I was working on a startup, which I subsequently stopped working on. I joined the Center for Social Innovation and Entrepreneurship, worked there for pretty much my entire law school life. In my third year, I did an internship at a venture capital fund. In my fourth year, I started a legal entrepreneurship cell, which sort of combined my passions. And then in my fifth year, I started Plain Crazy, a creative agency with one of my roommates. And I also applied for my MBA. And, it all seems really confused. And I've always thought about it like that, like, oh, I'm just really confused. I'll figure it out. But chapter 5 actually of the book is called How Confusion Leads to Personal and Professional Growth. And that's something I just thought really resonated because, I have been confused. I'm still not 100% sure about what I want to do. And I'm still sort of figuring that out. But, I think, especially in the society we live in today, there's a lot of focus or a lot of emphasis on, okay, you know what you want to do from a young age, and you either give your law entrance exams or you give your engineering, you become a doctor. And it's always sort of been like that in India. So I think, this chapter, How Confusion Leads to Personal and Professional Growth, really resonated with me. And, I think one thing, so confusion usually makes people very uncomfortable. And I think the book recognizes that. The chapter talks about that, but it also says, okay, that's fine. It is going to make you uncomfortable, but it can also help you make vital discoveries in your life. And I think that's been true for me. But again, not to say, and again, the book makes this very clear that you shouldn't just be confused and let that go. And I think that's a clear example of what I'm trying to say when I say that the book has helped me contextualize or organize thoughts. Yeah, I've been confused and I know I'm confused and I'm trying to figure it out. But how exactly do you figure that out? And so that there's, 3 ways that the book sort of lays out that I thought was very helpful. And I'm just going to sort of refer to my notes over here, but the 3 points, and it was A, be productively confused instead of hopelessly confused. So, the way I interpret that, and, I'm sure everyone will interpret this in many ways, but it's that, okay, you recognize that you're confused. That is step 1, and that's really important. But B, then you shouldn't be like, okay, I'm confused and everything's going to just figure itself out, or, oh my God, I'm so confused, I don't know what to do, and let that affect you. I think, when I was confused, I decided that, okay, it's best to try out as many things as I can. So I did the VC venture capital internship in my third year. I started the creative agency in my fifth year because I was like, I really want to know what it's like to start my own company. And I was coding a lot more then, which is something I love. So I was like, okay, this is going to help me figure out if I want to do, maybe I want to code full time. And also just in terms of hiring, in terms of a lot of things I want to learn about how to run a company that helped. But then, I figured out, okay, this is not what I want to do long term. So I switched and I moved to Dr. Vaidya. So I work in CEO's office, which is an e-commerce company. And over there, I look at certain tech implementations. I look at brand building. I look at social media. So I'm trying out as many things as I can. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to join that role, because it just fits in with exactly my aim, which is to try out as many things as possible. So, I think when you are confused, and what the book says is be productively confused instead of hopelessly confused. And I think that's very important. Make sure that you use that confusion to the best of its abilities. It's a great thing to be able to try out as many things as possible. So definitely do that. Point number 2 that the book brought out was manage negative emotions when they occur. and don't let it get to you. And I think that still ties into point one. But basically, the way I looked at that as well was that, okay, it's very easy, especially in today's day and age, when you see so many people around you, there's so many people doing so many things. I think even in the lockdown, there have been a lot of people, me included, confused that, okay, if I have a little bit of extra time, what can I do? And again, I've started a newsletter. My brother and I have been thinking of podcasting, reading more, writing more. And I think, it's very easy to get overwhelmed by the amount of options we have today. And B, just, if you find yourself in this position where like you're trying out multiple things and it's not working out, it's very easy that, okay, it's going to get to me. What do I do now? But I think it's important that you manage those emotions and sort of just look at it in a positive light, sort of approach it a little more systematically as well. And then the third point was be willing to risk failure. And again, when I talk about trying out so many things, when I tried applying to HBS, or when I started a creative agency in law school, obviously no one really thought that, okay, no two law students can really start a creative agency. And we've been lucky enough to be able to grow that out. It's, still running till today, touch wood. So, it's important that, okay, you are confused and you want to try new things, but don't limit yourself. Don't put yourself in a box where it's like, you seem like you're, and I know there was an NC Insider newsletter recently that spoke about this, Charles Bukowski. Don't try. It was about, if you're trying something, try it full-hearted. Don't sort of limit yourself and like act like you're taking a risk, but still being risk averse at the same time. And that's what the book really talks about. Is something that I know Utkarsh has spoken to me about as well. And I think that's great advice. At some point, if you're taking a jump, if you are confused and you want to let that, and you want to help figure that out, I think that, you need to be willing to risk failure. And a couple of other things. So there's this professor, Dr. Sidney DeMello, who the book mentions, and he says, confusion augments learning as long as it's properly induced, effectively regulated, and ultimately leads to a certain goal. And I think, just again, it's a very easy framework when you think about it like this. And before the book, I wasn't thinking about this or thinking about it in this context, but it's, make sure that, okay, you're willing to try new things, you're willing to risk failure, but you're also managing any negative emotions and using this confusion positively. And another thing I wanted to do was, from each of these chapters, pick up one quote. So the quote I saw in this chapter from the book that really resonated with me was the professor of biomedical engineering at Yale, Martin Schwartz, said, if we don't feel stupid and confused, it means that we're not really trying. And, I know I feel stupid and confused all the time. I'm sure a lot of people feel that way as well. So, it's great to sort of have some validation when it comes to that, and to know that it can be looked at positively. So I think the books helped me look at it that way. And, just moving on to the next chapter, chapter 4, which is Art of Being a Deep Generalist. I think, again, over here, when we talk about confusion, trying out many things, what tends to happen, what's happened to me is that, okay, I've tried out coding, I've tried out the creative agency, some marketing. Even at my current role, I look at certain tech things. I look at brand building, influencer marketing, revenue growth, customer retention. So you're just trying out many things. And all our lives, we've been told, figure out what you want to do and do it all your life and all of that. And there's a huge emphasis on specializing. It's like, okay, be a specialist. If you want to succeed, be a specialist. Even when we started the creative agency, a lot of the feedback I used to get was, okay, it's great that you're doing this, but don't try being an agency that does everything. Be an agency that focuses on one thing. So over there, then again, personally, a lot of advice I get is, okay, it's great you've tried out all of these things, but now what is it that you want to do long term? Pick one thing, focus on it. If you want to do entrepreneurship, focus on it, figure that out. If you want to do VC, take that route, but focus on it. And all my life, this has sort of been the thought process that I need to figure out what I want to do, and I need to become an expert at it. And the book mentions David Epstein, who wrote this book called Range, Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World. And he gives two examples of sports people. One is Roger Federer. And he talks about the sampling period where Roger Federer tried out multiple different sports before he sort of settled on tennis. And of course, a lot of hard work, and of course a lot of natural talent as well. But he figured out what he wanted to do through the sampling period. And I'll talk about his second example of the other sports person in a bit. But this is what this part of the book really resonated with me, because this is something I've been really confused about, even going into HBS. A lot of feedback I've gotten from, or a lot of advice I've gotten from professors, students, is that when you're coming into HBS, know what you want from it so you can make the most of it. And I ended up deferring by an extra year as well, because I was like, okay, maybe I need some more time to work. Maybe I need some more time to figure out what exactly I'm looking to do. So, it's good to know that that's not always needed. But the book raises a very interesting point, and that's the art of being a deep generalist. So it's not just a generalist, it's deep generalist. And, when I was reading this book, I thought about that quote, jack of all, master of none. And we've always been told, right? Oh, you're okay, or you're decent, or you're above average at multiple things, but you're great at nothing, and that's never going to help you succeed. But what this book has helped me realize is that, moving forward, I think the future sort of lies with people who are deep generalists. And again, I think it's very important to note the difference between generalist and deep generalist. And over here, when I say deep generalist, right, what do I really mean? Okay, fine. I did a little bit of coding. I did a little bit of I've done law. I've done marketing. I've done some tech stuff. I've done the e-commerce role. I've done customer retention. So, it's a little bit of everything again. I've dabbled a bit in writing. I've, tried doing a couple of internships or talked to a lot of people and looked at investing. So, again, you've touched upon many things, but what am I really good at? What am I really specializing at? But I think, when you're being a deep generalist, it means, okay, you are doing all of these things, but you're not just touching the surface. So when I code, I've been coding for years now, so I understand how that works. And I'm not the best coder, and I don't think I'll ever be the best coder, but at least I have a good enough working knowledge where someone gives it me, I can understand it. With law, again, I might not be practicing law, but I've done 9-10 internships. I've done 5 years of law school. So again, I know what it really is. And of course, by no means am I saying I really know what it is to be a lawyer, nor do I understand the law. Like my dad says, and he's been practicing law, or how my granddad says actually, and he's been practicing law for like 60 years. You're always learning every single day. And I don't think that's ever going to change. But at least you know enough where you're not just touching upon the surface. And what the book talks about when it comes to being a deep generalist is, again, and actually today only I read this article that Vani Kola, the founder of Kalari Capital, put on LinkedIn, where she says, where she talks about, again, the book, why generalists sort of triumph in a specialized world. But I think the first point the book brings up, which is really important, is that very often we tend to specialize without knowing why. So even for me, when I was 18 years old, I decided that, okay, I want to do law school. And then that meant I have to do 5 years of law. And usually once people have done 5 years of law, they're like, okay, now I've done 5 years of law school, paid for 5 years of law school. This is what I'm going to stick to. So, very often, whether it's engineering, being a doctor, IIT, I know I have a cousin who's been preparing since he was 14, 15. So you're making this decision really early before you even really know what it means to do that. I made the decision to do law before I even really knew what it meant to work in a law firm. You're making a decision to be a doctor without even really understanding the full thing. So I think, that's definitely one sort of problem we have when it comes to specialization. And the second thing, and I'm seeing this, and I think this is really important, is that it hinders lateral thinking. And what lateral thinking means is that you can pull upon concepts from disparate concepts or different domains and put them together. And I think moving forward, especially the world we live in today, and especially for people who want to start their own companies, who are running bigger companies, who are working in consulting, who are working in investing, for mostly any sort of profession today, and more so than not for entrepreneurs, you need to be able to understand several different aspects, because we live in an increasingly multidisciplinary world. So you need to be able to understand several different aspects, and you need to be able to put them all together. Think of, when it comes to problem solving, you don't want to just focus on one very narrow aspect and then, not be able to look at it from multiple ways. And that brings me to the third point that the book brings up, is that if you specialize very early, or if you're very specialized, you tend to approach every problem with the same lens. There's that quote from Charlie Munger where he says, to a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And that's one of my favorite quotes, because it's so true. If you have only one way of looking at things, you're going to only have one way of sort of coming to a conclusion or solving that. And I think today, being an entrepreneur, being a CEO, being a young professional, or honestly for anyone, it's just really important to be able to understand several different aspects. We talk a lot about AI, blockchain, ML without really understanding the ramifications, without understanding the concepts. We talk a lot about, policy without really being in it. We talk a lot about climate change. We talk a lot about the environment. We talk about a lot of different things. And these are all things that CEOs need to take into play, young professionals need to take into play when making decisions. So if you're not able to understand all these things, you're going to come at a very one-dimensional, or arrive at a very, not always, but more often than not, arrive at a one-dimensional sort of answer or solution to your problems. And there's this mental model that the book talks about, and I'll try bringing up some of the mental models in a bit if I have some time, but it's called the golden hammer. And basically it's the same thing. It's saying that, so I'm just referring to this report that I have open, but talking about the golden hammer, it's exactly this, that to every man with a hammer, to a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And there's this World Economic Forum Future of Work report. And I've been to a couple of these Network Capital Future of Work conclaves. I've even had the opportunity to speak at some of them. And I think what's becoming increasingly clear is that in the future, and this sort of work of the future, and that's been accelerated a lot by the current pandemic we're in, everyone's working remotely, everyone's working, you're finding new ways to solve problems that you've never faced before. And the World Economic Forum report says that, okay, in this decade, there are two things you're going to see an increase of, and that's intersectoral work and interdisciplinary work. And for someone who's unable to look at the world in an interdisciplinary manner or bring different concepts together, you're going to have an increasingly difficult time going forward. So I think, it's important to sort of keep the golden hammer mental model in your mind. And it also said, the report said, the golden hammer will become a barrier to professional growth, and to mitigate the negative impact, there are two things you need to do. And one is constantly work to learn new and changing skills, and B, work at the intersection of things. And, when you talk about upskilling, it's the new buzzword. Everyone wants to upskill. Everyone wants to sort of learn new things. We're seeing a lot of edtech companies. We're seeing things like Masterclass, the Network Capital Masterclasses. I watch them all the time because it's really interesting, because you're learning from your peers and you're learning from people who are in completely different sectors from you, but at least you're able to understand a little bit of how they think, how they approach things, and all of that. And just talking, about the future of work, the pandemic, I just want to talk about chapter 7, which is why AQ matters more than IQ and EQ. And to be honest, I had never heard of AQ before. In that context, I'd never really heard of it as AQ, but it basically means adaptability quotient. And the chapter talks about why the adaptability quotient is more important than, say, the intellectual quotient or emotional quotient at this time, and moving forward. And I think, again, that comes down to the future of work, what this WEF report talks about, being working at the intersection of things, and most importantly, constantly working to learn new things, upskilling yourself. At Plain Crazy, and we had this sort of inside joke / concept, but my co-founder Sayam is a lawyer. I'm a lawyer. Our first hire, who's still with us, our partner, chief of marketing, was a economics and international relations grad from the London School of Economics. And then our second hire happened to be from design school and specializing in that. But we had this concept called, or this thing we used to refer to as LSNED. And it basically meant learn something new every day. And, we really lived by that, because for us, it was something that a lot of us had never even, we were approaching problems or approaching things that we had never learned. When I was doing web development, it's not something I'd been properly trained in. When Sayam, my co-founder, was animating videos, he had no proper training. So every day we would either try doing a course or on YouTube or talking to people and trying to learn new things. And I think, A, that exposed us to a lot more, but B, it made us very adaptable. And that's what the book talks about, right? So the book says that the adaptability quotient is the ability to change course and repivot in response to unanticipated change. And I think, according to me, that's the most important skill someone can have moving into this next sort of decade or the rest of the century. And I'm saying that very sort of casually, but I think the current pandemic is the best sort of example of this. It came from almost nowhere, other than Bill Gates and maybe Taleb and a few other people. Not too many people saw it coming. And even when it came, right, like I remember very clearly when I was in the office, and we decided that, okay, we're going to stop. We were like, okay, 3 weeks, see everyone back. And now it's been 6 months, 7 months, moving into the 8th month. And we're all still sitting at home. And these are things that we were completely unanticipated. But you're seeing certain companies doing better. And of course, there is luck involved. But I think a lot of the companies that were able to adapt really quickly are the ones that are surviving and the ones that are thriving. And it's the same for you in a personal aspect, right? We're going to go through many more situations in life, and it might be on a smaller, more personal scale where you're faced with change and you're trying to adapt. It might be on a bigger scale, like this pandemic, where suddenly we're all stuck at home, absolutely no idea what to do. For a lot of us, work from home is new, working remotely is new. So at Plain Crazy, at Dr. Vaidya, both places we've had people join on the team, and great people who we've never even been able to meet. You're hiring people without meeting them. And it looks like, everyone keeps saying this is the new normal, but who knows, right? It's going to adapt and keep adapting as we get used to it. So you really need to have this ability to adapt to the new sort of situations and unanticipated change, more importantly. And over here, the book mentions the founder of MIT's Presencing Institute, Otto Schramer, who gives you the framework for strengthening your adaptability. And there are 3 points he talks about. One is having an open mind. Second is having an open heart. And third is having an open will. An open mind, he says, you should just have a fresh set of eyes when you approach new problems. And you should just be open to new possibilities. When you talk about open heart, just augmenting your empathy, empowering yourself to new perspective. And then your open will, which is letting go of your ego and embracing discomfort. And just my quote that really resonated with me on this chapter was Satya Nadella from the book Hit Refresh, where he says, evolving doesn't mean abandoning everything that worked for us. We should strive to retain elements of our past that gave us meaning and let go of the baggage that weighs us down. And I think that's really, really true. It's like you need to be light. You need to be light on your feet. You need to be able to be quick to adapt, and moving forward in this new normal or whatever it may be, we need to be able to just do many different things very quickly. And I think all these 3 chapters I've spoken about, right? How confusion leads to personal and professional growth, leading into, using that confusion to become a deep generalist, and then using your skills as a deep generalist to be able to pivot to anything life throws at you, because you haven't only specialized in one thing, but because you have so many different skills, you're able to approach every problem with an open mind, open heart, and open will. That's how the book really resonated with me. These are things that really stood out to me on the book, and I hope that they resonated with you too.
Great. Thanks, Mishaal, for that wonderful presentation. And I'm really glad that you were able to share your perspective. I know you were not expecting me, but I thought I'll surprise you towards the end. You've been on Network Capital from the very beginning. And one of the things that I've admired so much about you is that, you have a really can-do spirit and willingness to learn and hunger to share. And you shared a bunch of thoughtful insights. In fact, people from different parts of the world commented, this guy is good. So I think you should take great pride in it. But a couple of questions, and I also have my friend Sambuddha here, who happens to be, we were just chilling, and he's here. He's going to join us for this conversation as well.
Great.
Tell us, when you thought of the book and the key ideas that were presented, you shared some things that jumped out at you and which you're applying. What were some things that made you think or question? What are some things that you that weren't directly applicable to you, and how did you make sense of that? Because I don't want everyone to apply everything I'm saying. The idea is to interpret it in different ways.
No, correct. And I do agree with that. I don't think everything stood out to me. Maybe these were the 3 chapters that stood out to me the most. There were many other chapters, mental models, the butterfly effect, luck surface area, survivorship bias, all of these things that sort of jumped out at me, but there were a lot that didn't jump out at me as well. And I think that's completely okay. And I think that'll be true for most people who read the book. But, I think there are two things when it comes, again, the way I looked at the book is that, okay, this is helping me contextualize and organize my thoughts, and also just contextualize and organize how I think about the world in general. So just because something didn't resonate with me doesn't mean it doesn't resonate with someone else. And the way I looked at it, so for example, when I first read Survivorship Bias, which is a mental model, which, for those who haven't heard of it in this context or with this name, it basically means that we tend to focus on we tend to focus on things that have survived or have succeeded, while completely disregarding the things that didn't make it through or the things that didn't survive. And when I read the example in the book, it talks about certain planes that when they were looking to solve certain problems, they were looking only at the planes that had survived the war,
Right,
or the battle or whatever. It didn't survive that. And I was like, okay, this is interesting, doesn't really apply to me. And then I start thinking about it in my context, right? Or thinking about other people's context rather. And one thing you see a lot of people in the world do is that you'll only talk to people who've sort of done something. And when you first think about it, or when I first thought about it, I was like, of course, if I want to talk about someone who's got into, say, HBS or gone to VC, why would I approach someone who's not gotten in? But when I thought about it a little more, I read the chapter again, I spoke to a couple of people about it. What I realized was that there's so much you learn from people who've maybe not even gotten in, but both in terms, and people talk about failure like this. It's like, okay, if you fail, there's so much you learn from it. What I see failure teaching you is that failure teaches you what not to do. And I think it's the same thing with when it comes to survivorship bias. I was like, okay, that forget professional, forget schools, education. Just generally when I'm talking to my marketing team about a campaign that didn't work, you shouldn't only focus on the campaigns that did work, but focus on the campaigns that didn't work as well, so you know what not to do next time. And of course, that's a very small and relatively irrelevant example. But I think a lot of these things that didn't jump at me at the first, just help me contextualize so many other things that we see in the world on second or third read.
Yeah. And I think, as I also quote in the book, that history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes, paraphrasing Twain. And this is something that you can only understand when you reflect on failure. So, the way the book is structured is that initially it guides you into a way of thinking, and then comes the mental models, then it comes to people who've done really interesting things in terms of productivity, creativity. And one thing, Mishaal, that you've done really well in your early 20s and as you go into business school is to really question assumptions and see whether you've picked the right road or not. So talk to us about some experiments and misadventures that haven't worked. And again, like Sambuddha is a proud Kellogg alum, and one of the chapters that I wrote about was based on some research done at Kellogg, which was that how repeated failure leads to success. But the key is to keep trying, and there's a way in which you need to go about trying. So talk to us, Mishaal, about some adventures and misadventures along the way. Talk to us about some of the failures or the experiments that you've done. More importantly, is there a right way to go about experimenting through your career?
So talking a bit about what didn't work, and talking about what exactly, or whether there's a right way. Starting with that, I don't think there's a right way at all. In my head, there's no sort of way to figure out whether what you're doing is right. Right? That's the entire point of experimentation, is that if you're trying out different things, the point is to figure out what you like, not sort of go into it knowing what it is. And again, when it comes to experimentation, I don't think there can be a right way, because it's not something you can really plan out or strategize. Maybe if I know I want to either be a lawyer or a judge, I can experiment within that small segment and figure it out. But when it comes to being a deep generalist, when it comes to sort of applying even just the golden hammer approach, or when it comes to figuring out what you want to do and actually exploring your confusion, there's definitely no right way in my perspective. When it comes to things that have not succeeded, so going into law school, I mentioned this briefly, but I was working on a startup, and it was called T Launcher, and the idea was we build a social media network for artists like poets, writers, musicians, anyone in that field to be able to sell their work, connect with their fans. And of course, there are many different sort of platforms that do this. And of course, my co-founder and I thought we had it all figured out, the next big idea. And I think the more I sort of worked on it, and the more I spoke to people about it, I felt like I wasn't ready. And so after we had worked on it, tied up with companies, invested some money from my first real internship, all my money went in building out the platform. And then I was like, okay, but is this something that really works, or is this something I really think I'm ready for? And I thought, no, maybe not. And it didn't work out. And we actually never ended up launching. And that's fine. I don't really think it negatively impacted me. If anything, it really prepared me for the next time I was ready to start up. And I think it's important to look at all sort of situations that don't work out in some sort of positive light. And obviously there is negative aspects to it. And I don't think we can completely discount those. It's not like I think, oh, it was all great and I'm so happy this happened. Of course, I'm not pleased that I hadn't planned it perfectly, but there is a lot of learning from it, and it's always going to happen. There's so many things. We tried at Playing Crazy. We launched new sections. We even tried launching a sister company at a point, and for whatever reason, it didn't work out. And that's fine, I think, as long as you're not letting that get to you. And again, don't be in that hopeless confusion sort of place, like, oh, it didn't work, what to do. Use it productively and make the most of it.
Yeah. Mishaal, I wrote this book remembering my 20-year-old self and 25-year-old self. And, of course, extrapolating 5 years out and seeing how, say, a 30-year-old person would respond to it. But it's really important to know that we underestimate the change that we'll go through. And that's something that I first read about in literature. Then I spoke to, my mentors, my professors from INSEAD, from Ashoka and from other places, and spoke to my friends such as Buddha and you and many others who are part of it. And I realized that because change is something that is that accompanies us, this productive way of being confused is something which really enables us to deal with failure better. Because then you're not constantly asking yourself, why did this happen to me, or why didn't this work, but rather you try and reflect on some of your failures and try and build upon it. And I think from your pre-MBA career, that's something that you've done quite well, which is to reflect on some things that worked and some things that haven't. And then I think curiosity has led your way. And the way the book is arranged is that if you look at a school, like a child in school, to a person entering college, to graduating, to heading to business school, 5 years out of business school, 25 years out of business school, it basically has stories of different people. You are one person, and there are many others which people will hear from. I'll just have one more question for you, because I know it's a Friday night, and even though it's Corona, I'm sure people have things to do. Is that you mentioned that you're going to keep coming back to the book? So in the few days that you've read it, what are some ways you suggest readers come back to the concepts and apply them? So when I wrote the book, there are 5 key points that everyone should remember about each chapter, which I've written. But do you come back to those 5 key points? Do you come back to the sections you've highlighted, to your own notes? Or what's your advice to the prospective reader?
So, I don't know if I'm qualified to sort of give advice on this, because I know everyone has a different way of learning, different way of sort of understanding, whether that's highlighting, taking notes, whatever it may be. The way I've been looking at it, and of course, I think the key takeaways at the end of every chapter has been very helpful. I'm sorry, I think my audio wasn't coming clear. I lost it. I don't know if I was trying to talk about the lux surface area. I'm not sure if anyone heard me. But that's one place. The lux surface area was something I didn't resonate with it immediately. And I came back and suddenly I was like, oh, this is something I should be applying to my life. And especially for me, and again, as someone who went through 5 years of law school and had to go through the longest judgments in the world from the Indian courts, I've picked up this habit of sort of speed reading, or reading, having this
not necessarily the greatest habit of skimming through certain parts. And that usually works completely fine. A lot of non-fiction books, I find there are certain main topics that you're able to glean very quickly, and you understand those. And I usually highlight, or if I'm reading a paperback or if I'm reading a hard copy, I'll make small notes. I literally, I've been rereading actually 0 to 1, and I have a pencil here that I've been taking notes in the book. On my Kindle, I tend to highlight, and sometimes if there's something that really resonates, maybe I'll not note it down on my phone, but usually I don't like taking notes because I feel like that disrupts my reading process. And I know that's true for some people like reading it. But the way this book is structured, right, it's not one concept or two concepts or three concepts. It's 60 plus concepts, and many more that come, sub-concepts that come within the chapters. So, it's not something that you can read and you're like, oh yeah, now I know 60 new things, or I've contextualized my life, or I've picked up so many new concepts. Like we were talking about, there's certain things you might not agree with or might not even understand on first read. But when you go back to it, when you think about it a little more deeply, I think a lot of the chapters require deep thinking. Maybe like these 3 chapters, they initially resonated with me, so I remember them, and I didn't really, need to go back even when I was trying to make notes. But there are many other chapters that didn't necessarily resonate with me as much. Where I did like going back, when I was looking at the mental models, I sort of skimmed through them again, picked up things like the shifting baseline system, where on first glance I was like, okay, this is completely irrelevant to my life. And then I started thinking, and I was like, adaptability quotient relates exactly to the shifting baseline system. And in the book, it's put out in a more individual or in a more sort of global, on a world stage way. But there's so many different ways that you can interpret each of these things, both on a personal and a professional level. So that's what I mean when I think that it's really useful to keep going back. And also, it's easy to forget these things when you go back to living your life day to day. But I think for me personally, as someone who is confused very often, who is, a generalist and hopefully on the way to being a deep generalist, going back helps me remember this and helps me contextualize these things and work on them with a structure moving forward.
So, thank you, Mishaal. I cherish your patronage. I cherish how much you contribute to Network Capital. I cherish this conversation. But I also want to conclude the first of several roadshows by saying that this book is largely a result of the conversations that I've had on Network Capital with the members that we have around the world and the data that I've collected. So each of you has helped me put this book together in your own special way. And none of it is just plain imagination. I've gone through the task of doing the academic research, then complementing it, collecting data, then thinking about it, then reflecting upon it some more. And each of you has helped in your own special way. Some of you have created content on Network Capital. Some of you helped brainstorm, think through some of the most strategic aspects of it. So if I were to give you one advice or one suggestion as a friend of how you might want to read this book, I would say that each of these concepts or each of these mental models is a frame of reference. You don't need to take them too seriously or not seriously. This is just a way of thinking. Please contextualize them and try and think clearly. And I'd like to conclude by saying clarity is power. In my book, I've attempted to take a step towards augmenting career intelligence by taking one step towards clarity. Thanks very much. Thank you, Mishaal. Thank you for everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone who tuned in. Definitely read the book. I cannot recommend it more. And Utkarsh is very modest in his own way, saying that he's attempted to augment career intelligence, but there's no doubt that he's succeeded as well. So do pick up a copy of the book, and excited to have many more conversations with all the Network Capital members and many people around the world about what they think and how they're using the book to contextualize their own sort of journeys as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mishaal. Look forward to your next masterclass. There's a huge demand for a bunch of things that I'm going to follow up on that. Cheers. Bye.
Bye. Take care.
Cheers.